All right, Josh Steimle, continuing my video series on how I am hiring virtual assistants from the Philippines. And actually, I already hired 3 of them. I'm a little bit behind on the videos, trying to catch up here. Here are 17 questions that I asked my VAs while I was doing the hiring, which I feel like really helped lead to a successful outcome in terms of hiring the right people, who I'm thrilled with, by the way. So I wrote an article about this for Entrepreneur Magazine. I'll put that link in the notes below. Here we go with 17 questions you should ask your VAs when you're doing interviewing and hiring. So first of all, how did you end up where you are today? This is an open-ended question. It's on purpose. I want to see how they answer. This isn't just idle chit-chat. I want to see if the VA is comfortable talking about himself or herself, whether she's comfortable with such an open-ended question that doesn't have any sort of easy answer. I want to see if they give me a long question or a long answer, a short answer. Not that any answer is necessarily right or wrong, but if they really struggle talking about this, then that tells me something about how it's going to be communicating with them. So I'm looking for an easy answer, somebody who's able to converse naturally, somebody who can just come up and with an answer and just talk normally like a normal human being. I want to make sure that they're not super deferential to me, that they kind of treat me as an equal. And this is a good question to get things started, and also to help them get comfortable just in case they're a little bit nervous. Number 2, what do you enjoy doing outside of work? This allows me to learn more about the VA on a personal level. It reveals things I might not find out through other questions. One VA I interviewed recently chose to tell me that he's running a small business on the side, which is valuable information to me because it tells me that he's got some entrepreneurial spirit there, and I like to see that. And I did have one case where I was using an outsourcing team before, and they talked about, I didn't ask them this question, but it came out while I was working with them, that they enjoy getting drunk for 3 days and disappearing and not communicating. Well, if I talk to somebody and they say, hey, I like to party, and then maybe they're not the right hire for me. Maybe it's not the right fit. Number 3, what type of work are you best at? What are you most interested in learning more about? What are you not good at? What work do you prefer not to do? I really push hard on this question because I do not want somebody who says, oh, I'm good with anything, just give me whatever, I'll do whatever you want to do. That tells me that they're not confident about their abilities. Somebody who's confident and really good at one thing is going to be confident telling me that they're not good at something else because they know why they're getting hired and why they're not getting hired. Somebody who tells me they're good at anything, they'll do whatever I want them to do, it tells me that they're not really confident in their abilities. They're probably not somebody that I want to work with. And also, I just want them to answer the question. I want to give them work that they want to do. That's what I want with all the people I work with. And I don't want to plug somebody into a role that they're not going to be happy in because they're going to quit and they won't do a good job on the work in the meantime. Number 4, what is your favorite way to communicate? So I'm an email guy. That doesn't mean I can't work well with somebody who's a phone person, but I do a lot of communicating by email, and if I like to know, do they want me to pick up the phone? Do they want to get on Skype? Do they want to see my face? Or are they okay with getting one of my epic, super long emails and then having to respond to that epic email? I just want to know so that I can adjust the way I work to work with them, and so that they know how I work and maybe they adjust how they work to work with me. Number 5, have you hired and fired other employees? And tell me about your worst experience firing someone. This one has been really critical for me lately because the VAs that I'm hiring are just the beginning. I anticipate that I'm going to have a largish team, meaning maybe 10 to 20 VAs eventually based in the Philippines. And that means the VAs I hire today might be responsible for managing VAs tomorrow. And if they have never hired somebody, if they've never fired somebody, then they're going to have to learn that on the job. And I don't want to hire somebody who has to learn that on the job. I want to hire somebody who's already done that before. The second you have to fire your friend from a job, your friend that you hired, it changes who you are as a person, and that's valuable experience for me. Not that I want them firing tons of people, but if they've had that experience, they work differently, and the way that they manage is different than if they've never had that experience, and is better So I need people who have that kind of background, have that experience. At least I do right now. How have you handled a situation where someone you managed wasn't performing well, but not so poorly that you needed to fire them? So in addition to hiring and firing, I want to know, how did you deal with a situation where you had to work with somebody and help them to get better? And number 7, if I asked you to perform a task and after accepting it you realized you couldn't do it on your own, what would you do? I'm not just looking for an answer, I'm also looking to see if they are thinking about the answer for the first time. If they say, well, I guess I would, that tells me they aren't as experienced as I would like. If they say, oh, I've been in this situation before, and even though it was kind of embarrassing, I went back to my boss and I talked to him, I asked for clarification, that's better. It shows me that they've been through that situation before and they've got some experience dealing with what can be an awkward situation. I want them to have an easy time dealing with that with me. Number 8, what would you do if I gave you an assignment and you thought you understood it, but then later you realized you didn't understand it? So this situation is potentially much more embarrassing for a VA than the last one, because once a VA has said he understands an assignment and he's got it, then he kind of has to come clean. This happens to everybody. You get into a situation, you think you know what you're doing, you say, oh yeah, I got this, and then you get halfway into it and you realize, ooh, I don't really understand this. And that's embarrassing, but I want a VA who can work through that and say, you know what, I'll just suck it up and say, you know, I thought I understood this, but I really don't. I ran into this issue here, and I need your help. I need some clarification. I want somebody who has the confidence to be able to do that. Number 9, if I gave you a bunch of assignments and you realized you couldn't get them all done fast enough to meet deadlines, what would you do? So nobody wants to tell the boss that they don't have an assignment done on time, but that's exactly what I want. If they're not going to get it done on time, I want them to tell me. I'm much happier if a VA comes to me and says, hey, you gave me this task, I was going to have it done by this day, it's not going to get done by that day, here's my new day that I can get it done by. I'm much happier with that than if they wait until the day it's due and then they say, oh, sorry, I'm not going to be able to get this done today when you thought it was going to be done. The sooner I know about that, the better. Even if it turns out that they tell me, oh, I can't get it done by this day, but then they do get it done by this day, I'd still rather know and then be pleasantly surprised that they got it done on time than the other way around. Number 10, can you tell me a story of when you spoke up and contradicted a boss or supervisor? I love an employee who will stand up to me and will say, you're doing this the wrong way. You should do it this way. Maybe not in that tone, maybe not exactly those words, but I love somebody who will stand up to me and push for their point of view and try to convince me that they're right if they really think they're right. I want to have that debate if they think that I'm wrong, because I just want to get it done the right way. I don't care if it's my way or their way. I just want it done the best way. Number 11, what communication problems have you noticed in previous work situations? A lack of communication or poor communication is the cause of so many workplace issues, especially with remote workers. I've got a lot of experience working with remote teams and workers in different countries and different time zones, and communication is so key. I want to know what problems they've noticed and how they handled those issues. Number 12, you're working on an urgent deadline and your computer crashes or your internet goes down. What's the first thing you do? No VA has gotten this answer right so far. So the answer I'm looking for is the first thing you do is you get a hold of me and you tell me there's a problem with the internet. It might be hard for me to communicate with you for the next few days. Especially in the Philippines, they have typhoons there. It'll knock out power. It'll knock out internet for a few days at a time. Now, if that happens, then maybe they can't communicate with me and they just can't tell me. That's a problem, but it's an understandable problem. Now, if a typhoon's coming through, they know ahead of time what they really should do is they should contact me and say, hey, there's a typhoon coming through. If anything happens with communications, it's probably because of this typhoon. It would be great for them to give me a heads up with that type of thing. Now, if there were some other sort of disaster, earthquake, something that's not predictable, of course I'm going to understand that. I'm not going to be happy still that they disappear for 3 days and I'm not hearing anything, but I'll understand once I get the explanation. But if I hear something like, oh, there was a typhoon coming through and I was at home and yeah, I could have gone to the Starbucks up the street and I could have sent you a quick email saying, hey, there's a problem here, I might not be in touch for a few days. I don't want to hear that they could have sent me a message, but they just chose not to for whatever reason, or thought that it would be okay to disappear for 3 days. I've heard a lot of nightmare stories from employers who said, yeah, I had this VA, I hired them, everything was going great, and then they just disappeared for 4 days and I didn't hear anything, and I thought maybe they were in the hospital, maybe they were dead, maybe they ran off. I had no idea what happened, and then they got back to me 4 days later and said, oh, yeah, my internet just went down. It's like, well, walk up the street and go to an internet cafe and get in touch with me somehow. However you can, get in touch with me and let me know that there's something going on. Number 13, what's an example of a time you proactively addressed a client's need? So it's not enough for a VA to do everything that I ask. I need a VA who's going to anticipate what I need and do it before I ask. Preferably get it done the right way and do the right stuff. But I really need this in VAs because I don't have time to ask them or tell them to do everything I need done. I need them to understand that there are some things that they should understand that need to get done, and not just the things I explicitly lay out for them. Number 14, what tools do you use in your work? What are some of your favorites? Whatever tools are that you use, it's a plus if your VA already uses the same tools. I use Google Docs a ton, and I don't want to just say to the VA, hey, I use Google Docs. Do you use Google Docs? Because of course they might say, well, yeah, I use Google Docs because that's how you get the job, right? So I like to ask before I give them the requirements, hey, what tools do you use? What are you familiar with? What do you like to use? And see what they come back with. Number 15, how quickly do you typically respond to emails? The right answer is not immediately, because nobody always answers emails immediately. But something like, well, usually immediately during working hours, unless I'm focused on a project or for my employer, but always within 24 hours, Monday through Friday. That's the answer I'm really looking for. Number 16, what are your schedule restrictions? What is your preferred schedule? So I have one VA I hired. She works from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's her preferred schedule because she has a child in school. She wants to be there when the child gets home and be able to focus on that child at 2 or 3 p.m. I have other VAs that want to work from 8 to 5. I have others who want to work from 10 to 6 or who prefer to work nights. I'm really okay with anything. You might not be, but you need to know what their preferred schedule is and find out to make sure there's a good match there. And number 17, last question, who were your 3 most recent employers? What tasks did you regularly do for them? And how will each of them rate your work on those tasks when I ask them? So I want to drive this point home with my prospective VAs that, yes, I do ask for 3 references, and yes, I do contact those references. And I ask those references 6 specific questions, which I'm not going to go through in this video, maybe another one. But these are taken from the book Who by Jeff Smart, which is the best book I've ever read on hiring. And so I ask these specific questions to the VA, and I say, hey, what are you good at? What are your tasks? What do your employers see that's valuable in you? What challenges did you experience with this employer? And then I go to the employer and I try to get the same answers from the employer. And if the answers don't jive, if the answers from the employer or the reference don't match up with the VA, then I know there's an issue there. Also, this helps the reference because usually the reference just gets questions like, hey, I'm thinking of hiring so-and-so. What did you think about working with them? The reference is going to say, yeah, they were great. And I want to get more than that. I really want to know. So I ask some pretty pointed questions to the reference to find out what did they really think about working with that VA. And I'm able to get some really valuable information out of them. And this worked great with the 3 VAs I just hired. I got great references. That doesn't mean they were 100% positive. Some of those references said, well, this person could have improved in this area or that area. But I got what I felt like were honest references, and it worked out great. So 17 questions that you should ask your VAs. Hopefully these are helpful. If you've got other questions that you think that I should ask or others should ask, tell us in the comments. Thanks.